Welcome to this edition of Race to Power. I'm Ananya Datta and here's what we have lined up for you tonight. The Indian Election Commission will be announcing the poll schedule tomorrow. We keep hearing about the largest democracy going to polls, but what does that mean in numbers? And how is the process looking like here on? Voting is underway in Russia. President Vladimir Putin is widely expected to be re-elected. But women in Russia are finding innovative ways to show their protest. We will bring you visuals from Moscow. India's Election Commission will be announcing the dates for the 2024 general elections at 3 p.m. on Saturday, that's tomorrow. And with that, the Model Code of Conduct will come into force from the time the dates are announced. Now, this will also mark the official end of the second term of the Narendra Modi government. The hectic run-up to the polls have seen face-off between the ruling NDA against the opposition India alliance, with both sides trying to bolster their alliances. The run-up has already seen several controversies over distribution of tickets to candidates, even as candidates for several seats remain unannounced. Besides the general elections, the Election Commission is set to announce elections for state assemblies in Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, Arunachal Pradesh and lastly Sikkim. The Model Code of Conduct will come into force to ensure free and fair elections. This effectively means that India's Election Commission will create a level playing field for all parties and stakeholders involved in the election process. The government or its ministers will be prohibited from announcing any financial grants or policy announcements, not even stone-laying ceremonies for projects. No appointments in government or public undertakings, no use of discretionary funds, no government-funded ads talking about the achievements of the government, no use of government transport for campaigning, access to all political parties to hold rallies at public places and strict prohibition against use of religious symbols or slogans while campaigning. Several opinion polls in the run-up to the elections back Prime Minister Modi for a third term. While he has been targeting demographies like women, youth, poor and the farmers, his opponents have been questioning his record on unemployment and rising prices of essential commodities. At close to 1 billion voters, India is the world's largest democracy, bigger than Europe and North America put together. It's now the fourth largest economy in the world and aspires to get into the top 3 soon enough. India's lower house Lok Sabha has 543 seats, including seats reserved for historically underrepresented scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. The tussle for the 17 Lok Sabha seats in the Indian state of Telangana has intensified. In the latest, K. Kavitha, the daughter of former Chief Minister K. Chandrasekhar Rao, has been arrested in connection with the Delhi excise policy scam case. Now, this comes just hours after the BRS chief announced an alliance with the Bahujan Samaj Party in the state. Now, her arrest was made after a raid was conducted by the Enforcement Directorate, a central agency headquartered in capital of New Delhi. Several lawmakers from Delhi-based Aam Aadmi Party have also been in jail in the same case. K. Kavitha's arrest comes on the day when the Bharat Rashtra Samiti has decided to allot 2 out of 17 seats for Bahujan Samaj Party. Under the seat-sharing agreement finalized for general elections, the BSP will contest from Nagar Kurnool and Hyderabad. BRS will contest from the remaining 15 seats. BRS is already facing a hard time after losing recent assembly elections and defection of several leaders, including 3 sitting MPs to BJP and Congress. Earlier, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a mega roadshow in the state capital of Hyderabad. Supporters and party workers crowded the streets as flowers were showered at the Prime Minister's convoy. The BJP is pushing hard to up its tally in the state this time. The party won 4 seats in the state back in 2019. The India bloc led by Congress is all set to contest all the seats in the state by itself, bolstered by victory in state assembly polls held in the month of November last year. Congress is expecting considerable gains in the state. The Russian presidential elections have begun. People are heading to the polls, exercising their right to vote in an election that is set to hand Vladimir Putin a 5th term in power and extend his rule by 6 more years. Even though the result is not in doubt, as Putin has no credible opponent, ballots will be cast over 3 days. Voting will continue until Sunday across the country's 11 time zones. From the far eastern regions near Alaska to the western enclave of Kaliningrad on the Baltic coast and its 88 federal subjects, including parts of occupied Ukraine illegally annexed by Russia after it launched its full-scale invasion more than 2 years ago. Russians can also vote online. This is the first time the option has been used in a presidential contest. According to the authorities, more than 200,000 people in Moscow did so soon after the polls opened. Russia's far eastern Kamchatka region also took part in the experimental electronic voting.
Kamchatka will set an example so that everyone can take part in the election and, as a single organism, a united people, express their opinion regarding what we want our country to be like in the future, what we all rally around and what we hope for in the future.
In the Russian city of Vladivostok, residents were seen posting their ballots at a polling station. Vladivostok is a major port city near the borders of China and North Korea.
We are now electing a president for the country, for the future, and I'm interested in what is being done now, and I would like it to be continued and even improved, because the younger generation must live in peace and harmony so that there is no war.
Voting is also taking place in parts of Ukraine that are now being controlled by Russian forces. Now, these are the visuals of displaced Avdiivka residents casting their ballot in presidential election in Russian-controlled Ukraine.
For better, I guess. You know what we hope for at this age? To be able to buy a piece of bread. To have a higher pension, you know.
Ukraine says it will not rest until it has ejected every last Russian soldier from those annexed territories. NATO chief also said that any attempt to organize elections in occupied regions would be illegal.
So the right to participate in fair and free elections is a fundamental part of any democratic society. But Russian citizens cannot count on freedom and fairness because opposition politicians are dead, in jail or exiled, and the press is not free.
As we said, voting is also taking place in the Russian-controlled parts of Ukraine. So who are the candidates contesting against Putin and who were barred from running? We take a look.
Russia is holding its presidential election, which President Vladimir Putin is almost certain to win. It will give the longest-serving Kremlin chief since Joseph Stalin another 6-year term in power. So how will it work? Russia's elections are taking place between 15th to 17th March. Results will follow shortly afterwards and the winner will be inaugurated in May. Voting is also taking place in what Russia calls its new territories, parts of Ukraine now controlled by Russian forces, which have been placed under Russian law. Ukraine says it will not rest until it has ejected every last Russian soldier from those annexed territories. There are 112.3 million people with the right to vote in the election. Almost 2 million people abroad can also participate and 12,000 in a cosmodrome which Russia rents in Kazakhstan. Around 70 to 80 million people usually cast ballots. Turnout in 2018 was 67.5%. This year, a remote online voting system is available for the first time. Putin is running against communist Nikolai Khartonov, Leonid Slutsky, leader of the Nationalist Liberal Democratic Party, and Vladislav Davinkov of the New People Party. Boris Nadezhdin, an anti-war candidate, was barred from running, as was Yekaterina Densova, a former TV journalist. 71-year-old Putin, a former KGB lieutenant colonel, has already served as president for longer than any other Russian ruler since Joseph Stalin. The 1993 Russian constitution was seen by some in the West as a development that would lead to democracy in post-Soviet Russia. It originally specified that a president could only serve 2 terms of 4 years if they were back-to-back. But amendments in 2008 extended the presidential term to 6 years, and changes in 2020 formally reset Putin's own presidential term tally to 0 from 2024, potentially allowing him to remain in power until 2036. The West casts Putin as a war criminal, a killer and a dictator. But opinion polls at home shows he has approval ratings of 85%, higher than before the invasion of Ukraine. The Kremlin says Putin enjoys overwhelming support from the Russian people and that Russia doesn't want to be lectured by the West about democracy. Russian officials say the West is trying to undermine Russia by casting doubt on the legitimacy of the election. The Russian opposition sticks to the formal rules of the tightly controlled political system. Despite having seats in parliament, it does not oppose the Kremlin on major issues. Putin's opponents, many of whom are in jail or have fled abroad, have been predicting since 1999 that turmoil will one day bring down the system over which he presides. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights said in January Russia had not invited OSCE observers to the election, calling the decision deeply regrettable. In 2018, ODIHR said there were intense efforts to promote turnout and that citizens voted in significant numbers, but added that, quote, restrictions on the fundamental freedoms of assembly, association and expression, as well as on candidate registration, have limited the space for political engagement and resulted in a lack of genuine competition.
On the first day of elections in Russia, we have received 2 separate cases from polling booths. These are being seen as acts of resistance. The first one is from the capital city of Moscow, where a woman poured green dye into a ballot box to try to disrupt voting. A criminal case has been opened against her. In another incident, a woman set voting booth on fire. This is a polling station in the same district where Alexei Navalny used to live. Now, in other news, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said that UK's national election will not coincide with local polls, therefore ruling out May 2nd as election day. And with that, the Conservative leader has put a full stop on a number of speculations. Earlier this year, the British Prime Minister suggested that the general election will take place in the second half of 2024. This ignited several rumours in Westminster. The most prominent one was that Number 10 is preparing to dissolve Parliament before the end of March. Reports claim that the UK is unlikely to hold a poll on any other day in May, and this is due to the logistical difficulties of organising 2 sets of elections. Earlier, Sunak was reluctant to specify a general election date, but opposition political parties tried their best to provoke Sunak into holding one. Opposition Labour Party claims the Conservatives are afraid to lose majority of their seats if they enter into a poll in the month of May. Sunak must hold a general election by January next year, but the UK Prime Minister has the power to call one before then. In order to do the same, the Prime Minister has to first ask King Charles III to shut the Parliament. In case Sunak does so, the authorities would need to prepare and hold the general elections 25 days later. The Conservative Party is already struggling in opinion polls. They predict Sunak will lose the election. This as Labour maintains a 20 points lead.
To reduce the number of people coming here by over a third last year.
Now a quick check on other election-related stories from around the globe. The leader of Spain's Catalonia region has called a snap election. Pere Aragonés made the announcement after his minority government failed to pass a budget for the wealthy northeast region surrounding Barcelona. The election had to be held before the end of the year. It will now be held on May 12th. Catalonia has been governed by separatist parties for over a decade, but the socialists of Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez have polled strong in the region recently. The impact of the Catalan vote on national politics is currently unclear. Moving on to Panama, where the presidential candidates faced off in a second debate ahead of the next general elections on May 5th. The first part of the debate touched on corruption, while the second part focused on the development of the economy for the youth. 7 candidates took part in the debate. Jose Molino, who is leading in the polls, declined to take part. He is the substitute for the presidential candidacy of former President Ricardo Martinelli, who was disqualified due to a money laundering conviction. Molino is a former foreign minister and Martinelli's former security minister. Senegal's Supreme Court has rejected a bid by one of the main opposition parties to halt a presidential election on March 24th. This has sparked the country from another constitutional crisis. The Democratic Party of Senegal filed an urgent motion to freeze electoral procedures earlier this month. They cited irregularities and alleged corruption. They claimed that these were the reasons behind the elimination of their candidate, Karim Wade. And with that, we are wrapping up this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching with me, Ananya Datta. I will see you next week.
On our show, we're privileged to meet all kinds of extraordinary business leaders, but honestly, I've never met one as Ankit Agarwal.
My father was in hospital, and when my father was getting discharged from the hospital, we had a really bad time in spite of him having an insurance policy. 2015 is when I joined the Car Dekho group and I got a chance to build out Insurance Dekho here. I firmly believe that if you're solving for a right problem with your heart at the right place, then you will build a business which people will know on their own. So I think what my grandfather taught me and what I saw my father practicing stayed with me in life.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
from New York, we get you to the sandy shores of Durban, where I'll bring you all the glitz, glam, and happenings from the world of showbiz.
Welcome to the Eras Tour.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
This week on E-Club, we look at the predictions by The Simpsons that ended up being true and get you a list of all that happened at the 96 Academy Awards. We also tell you some rare facts about the Indian superstar Alia Bhatt as she turns a year older. With me, Alison Lagrange, at these times only on WION.
On the next episode of World of Africa, memories of the Chibok kidnappings revisit Nigeria, forcing Kaduna State to be on high alert after gunmen stormed a school and kidnapped over 250 students. Senegalese presidential candidates launched their shortened campaigns 2 days after a court confirmed the election will be held on March 24th, ending weeks of uncertainty and kickstarting a competition that remains wide open. And meet a woman entrepreneur tackling hunger and empowerment through fishery in Nigeria. Watch World of Africa at these times only on WION. World is One.
Economic turmoil and global unrest have cast a shadow over President Joe Biden's approval ratings.
The rockets are continuing to be fired by Hamas in Gaza, although at a slower rate than previously.
So, right now, we are with the volunteers from the Aleppo municipality. They are still trying to go to the rescue for the people they can find out.
India has emerged as a major diplomatic force at the world stage.
The rising cost of living in Nigeria continues to impact citizens from all walks of life.
The citizens of Gujarat witnessed a mega roadshow here in the city of Ahmedabad.
China is South Africa's largest trading partner for 134 years straight.
A domestic aircraft carrying 72 people on board crashed in Pokhara city in central Nepal.
165 injuries have been moved, 61 people are confirmed dead, and rescue operations continue around me.
After receiving an entire season's rainfall in a span of 48 hours, Chennai city has literally been brought to its knees.